You're listening to Random Fit with hosts Wendy Batts and Ken Miller, winner of a Gold Markham Award for Digital Media.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Random Fit. I am Wendy Batts here with Ken Miller. Ken, how are you today?
Doing awesome, Wendy. You're looking good.
Oh, well, thanks. I try. You know, I showered for you today, so
And our
step
viewer.
one, right?
Yes.
Well, this week we're actually going to be talking about an assessment that I do very often with my clients, and we were reading about it actually in the news the other day. And Ken and I were talking about, doing this assessment that we're going to talk about. And I got a perfect 10. Just want to go ahead and say that from the very start. And my little co-host over here did not, and neither did my husband. So, ha.
All right. That's one of the advantages of being so close to the ground.
Okay, you're not a giant, my friend, by the way.
I know. I got these short, stubby legs too, so I have zero excuse.
So the assessment that we're talking about is an assessment that multiple people do, especially as we get older. And there are many ways of doing this, but it's actually called a sit to stand test. And, when you're doing some of the research, what they have found is when you're doing this, it shows a significant prediction of the mortality risk that you have, especially when we're dealing with the elderly population. And so with my clients, one of the first things I have them do is stand up. Then I have them sit on the ground, hopefully without using their hands, and then ask them to stand back up. And it is amazing how many people from the start cannot do that, which is an important activity of daily living.
Yeah. And I think, when we talk about this, there are variations of it. And I know we're going to go over a few of them, but the going from being upright and getting to the floor and then standing upright again. I mean, this was a challenge, as Wendy and I will discuss. It was not easy, but I think it's just something that we, with practice, can do. But I think, Wendy, the bigger point, the whole sit and stand, like when you talk about your ability to get onto the ground and then back up again, being a reflection, or as it relates to what the research showed when it comes to all-cause mortality, it's not just the sitting and the standing. Otherwise, all we would do all day is just sit and stand, sit and stand, sit and stand, and that's then you live forever. It is about your abilities, the abilities that you need to get down under control and stand up. So the reflection of having flexibility, having the strength, having the balance to do both the ascension and the descension of this assessment is really what we're looking at. And I think what we need to walk away from this whole conversation is, okay, well, once we do this evaluation, what do we need to do in our daily lives to not just improve our ability to sit and stand, but also how this reflects in our everyday activities and what we need to do to be more vital and more interactive with our daily activities.
Well, and I think it's important to preface all this too with, this assessment or this type of testing doesn't take in consideration any kind of musculoskeletal injuries that you may have. If you know that you had a structural issue at birth that maybe lacks range of motion and something that will never change, and you've always had to work around, basically if you didn't sleep well, if you're waking up with some aches and pains, maybe that's not the day that you're going to do this test to see if you pass or fail or get a number. And so we're just trying to think if a healthy individual comes in and wants to work with you, or if you're a fitness enthusiast and you just kind of want to see where you rank, it's actually super fun to do. We did it as a family in my house. And of course, I went first. We know that females tend to have more flexibility, but men tend to be sometimes stronger. I say sometimes because obviously that depends. But as we age, we start losing that. We start losing our strength, and we start losing some of our extensibility that we had if we don't work on it on a constant basis. And so, you're supposed to take off your shoes, be in comfortable clothes, and, not be on a slick surface. And when you're doing the typical sit to rise test, and you're working with somebody that can that is safe. Obviously, you always want to put them in the most safe environment. then what you have someone do is they stand in place and then they go down and cross their legs and sit on the floor. Now, again, when you're doing that, you're going to end up crossing your legs and you end up in a crisscross applesauce type seated position. And then can you stand back up from that specific position? And the first time I did it, I didn't have any problems. Second time, I didn't have any problems. I tried it again, seeing, am I using momentum? I tried it fast. I tried it slow. There's no tempo that you have to put with it, but there are points that get deducted if you plop down to the ground. If you use your hands, you use your forearms, you have to, you can't get up, or, if you're very unstable. And I know we're going to go into more of that, but I successfully did it. My husband did not do well the first time. He tried it again. Then he saw other people doing it on video and he's like, I'm going to get this. And by the third of, the first attempt, he had like a 9, then the second was an 8, and then he dropped back down to a 9. And then he finally got it because he realized that, if he used his arms a little more, he could get a perfect 10.
Right. And Wendy, you were there when I first did it. And I just could not do this. It was like I could get down, and even then the last 4 inches, I had that little plop, right? When I can hit, I heard, the ground was my stopper, really. And then when it came to getting, I just couldn't do it. But when I first tried it, I was not using my arms. I was not leaning. I was really trying to just use my lower body, and trying to just press down with my feet, and then just trying to use my hips the best I can. And I couldn't do it. So, Wendy, you laughed pretty hard when I said I can't get out. I just, just like that commercial, I have fallen and I can't get out. But with a little perseverance and a couple more attempts, getting that little lean, a little bit of momentum, get that trunk lean forward, and then just really powering through the hips and using basically all my trunk in getting up. I eventually got up with success. So I guess, what did we evaluate? Just based on my description, what was that? 8?
Well, I think the first one we calculated you at a 3.5, and all Ken kept saying is, I'm going to die. This is not good. I'm going to die. And I'm like, okay, based on research, it does say you have an increased mortality risk if you are below an 8. And, and so when you're looking at this, if there was a 2012 study that was found that it's a predictor of mortality in patients between 51 and 80, which you're almost there. And the study found that the lower the score, you were 7 times more likely to die in the next 6 years, y'all. 6 years. Now, again, that's the age range. However, most of the people that failed were at a higher age of prediction. So they were closer to the 81 years of age in comparison to the 51, because obviously that is a pretty significant amount of years in between that. So just, it's something that you can learn about yourself. Can you or can you not do this? And as soon as he said that, we were looking at the research. He's like, I'm going to try it again. He found ways to cheat, and y'all, he got a 9, I think, right?
Well, I'd say 8.5. The getting up without, was it uncoordinated, or however it's phrased? Unsteady. I was a little unsteady, a couple, little micro steps in there, but it was a lot better than a 3.5. I'll say that.
It was. And if you want to try this on your own, the way that you do it is you give yourself 5 points if you can go down without cheating. You have control. You're not plopping down at the bottom. And then you give yourself 5 points if you can stand from that position back up to an upright position without falling. So again, the way that you'll do this is each support that you give yourself, if you have to use your hands, if, like I said, forearms, knees, side leg, any of that, you remove 1 point. If you lose your balance or you're very unsteady, then you take off a 0.5 point, and you only have to do this once. Again, if you don't feel comfortable the first time you do it, you want to do it a couple of times, that's fine. The more your body understands that movement pattern, which is why we exercise and why we really focus on activities of daily living, our brain and our body learns that coordination pattern that we're trying to achieve. And we're going to be better each and every time we do it. And so that's something that I'm going to task all of you listeners with is I want you to try the stand, sit to stand and see how you do. Use that scoring system out of 10, and then think about what it is that you can do to make this an easier thing for you to try and do more often, because this is something you are going to have to do forever. And unfortunately, as we age, more people don't want to do things on the ground because they're scared that they cannot get back up. So this is something that should be implemented into your workout routine or into your daily life, because it is something that you really want to make sure that you're focusing on. And it's also going to help decrease the chances of you falling and breaking a hip as you age.
Yeah, and in the book, Built to Move by Kelly and Juliet Starrett, they talk about the sit and stand, right? And on one of their social media posts, they go to their knock on their neighbors' doors, and it's like, all right, sit and stand, police, or sit and stand, administration, coming in to check your sit and stand. So they just knock on their doors, and their neighbors are sitting and standing. Of course, I think they work out with them as well, but you see there's different ways of doing this, different techniques and styles. Everybody's got their own hitch and glitch when it comes to what their ankles can do, what their hips can do, and all of that. But like what Wendy said, I highly encourage you to do this. I mean, one of the things that we do with what I do with my clients is a ground to stand, right? And that's getting onto the floor, let's say prone on your stomach, using your hands to roll over and then stand up. And you can get up however you want, as the session goes. Sometimes they can lunge and get up, sometimes they can they can do like a kick sit get up. Basically they turn, put two hands on the ground, rotate their hips until they get both feet under them, and then they stand up. But I encourage that, especially with my older virtual training group, just because as we go, as you said, Wendy, the abilities to get down and get up start to go away as you lose mobility, as you lose strength, as you lose power. But one of the things that I like to encourage with all my people is find some way to be able to have a great relationship with the ground so that you can get onto the floor and then get up off the floor. And this assessment, this sit to stand, is one assessment that you can use just to look at and evaluate the quality of movement. And as it says, or as we've explained already, is that there is a point system. So qualitatively and quantitatively, you can look at and evaluate someone's ability to get down to the floor and stand up. But any type of ground to stand, anything where you're lowering yourself, standing up, whatever techniques you might use, if you're a personal trainer or if you're just an avid exerciser who listens to Random Fit, then just doing that, like say something like a burpee, right? Is an example of something that you might already do when it comes to standing and sitting. And once you've done this evaluation as we've described it, then you can start to look at, okay, am I doing enough? Am I doing it frequently enough? Should this be something I incorporate in some way, shape, or form into every one of my workouts? That's up to you. But all we're really trying to do here is evaluate, do you have the requisite flexibility, strength, stability, power to get down and up? Because as you said, Wendy, there is some correlation with your ability to stand and what that means for your longevity.
Yep. And today on Random Fit, Wendy Batts and Ken Miller here talking to you about the sit and stand assessment test. Again, this was an assessment that was developed in the 1990s by Brazilian researchers, just trying to see on a scale from 1 to 10, if we had you from a rising standing position, can you get to the floor and stand back up? And if not, they give you different things to look at, and then you deduct points, and then you see where you fall. Again, if you're scoring in the lower ranges, so anywhere from 0 to 3, they found that you were 5 to 6 times more likely to die within this study period that we talked about, which was about a 6-year period. And those within the fittest group that scored the highest or whatever had better mobility, longevity, and they were able to be more free in their life and not have to worry as much of activities of daily living or chances of falling. So again, it's not just something that we're like, hey, let's just try this. This is fun. There's actually research behind, why we do this and why we can bring it on the forefront, because it's, like I said, it's fun. It gives giggles, and it's very eye-opening for yourself as well as for trainers to see where are you on a mobility, flexibility, like you said, strength standpoint. Now, as we started diving deeper into the research, Ken and I both found that, there are a lot of elderly clients you don't necessarily want to get onto the floor because you don't know if you can get up. Obviously, you have to think about some of your obese clients that may struggle to get off the floor just because, again, mobility and strength. And so there's other types of tests that are good indicators of this as well. And Ken, you and I were looking at what they do a lot of times in physical therapy, what they do a lot of times with the elderly population. Instead of actually putting someone to the floor, they actually have these clients sit in a chair. So basically, there's a chair behind them. And for 30 seconds, they have the client or the patient stand and then sit onto the chair and stand back up. And the evaluator is timing for 30 seconds. They're counting how many times this person can do this successfully without losing their balance, without having to hold on. Again, you want to make it a safe environment. So you want the tools there that no one's going to fall. But then at that point too, it lets you monitor their performance. You can see their form. And the way that you get points deducted, phase 1, the forward transfer of trunk, can they do that? Phase 2 was the hip lifting off the chair and achieving maximal hip flexion and extension when they're sitting and standing. Can they transfer the knee extension, meaning are their knees moving as optimally as possible? Can their feet stay flat on the ground? Do they have good ankle dorsiflexion? And then are they stable? And there's points deducted as well for each one of those things that did not occur within that movement pattern. And I find it to be very important because, again, this is something we do every day. Getting on and off the toilet, getting in and out of your car, being able to sit on a step and talk with a neighbor and then stand up and go back inside, sitting outside, enjoying a cup of hot coffee in the morning on, can you get out of a chair on your balcony and then go back inside, all without feeling unstable or feeling like you are going to fall.
Right. And there are, that was a really great assessment used in various shapes and forms. Like we had clients that if they had some kind of aid to walking or to standing, they might use their cane or have their walker in front of them, and they'll use that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But there's been plenty of times where somebody has used that aid on the initial assessment, but because they've been doing their treatment or therapy or their exercise program for a certain amount of time, they've built up hip strength, they've built up their balance and their hip stability or their overall body's ability to stabilize and control that upright position, to where the initial assessment for the 30 seconds might have been with an aid, right? So they had their walker or a cane or whatever they used to help them walk. But then upon reassessment, they had seen such improvement that they're able to stand without that assistance and stand up on their own. So not that they're doing more reps necessarily, but the fact that initially for 30 seconds they needed help to begin with, but because of their protocol, to increase movement quality, strength, balance, stability, they were able to have enough to where they could sit and stand into the chair upright without any assistance at all. Even though their repetitions may be less, the fact that they didn't have help to begin with did help them out. So however you want to vary the assessment process, if you do work with somebody who's in maybe that post-rehabilitative or just deconditioned, right? They're if you find rationale for the use and application of this assessment, by all means use it. Like I mentioned in more than a few of our recordings here, I have this older group of gentlemen who are very much active. Now, just because the average age is in their 70s for the group, they're not necessarily qualified because they sit and stand with very well from a seated position. But for somebody that's not in that kind of shape, someone that has not worked out or this is new to them, then having that initial assessment and then compare it with the reassessment can be actually very encouraging, as you know, to kind of reflect on the progress that they've made, but also encourage them to, if you know, if you saw this much improvement within these amount of days, think of how much more you can get if you just continue this, you know, for the rest of your life.
Well, and you guys have heard me talk about my dad. I mean, my dad is going to be 83 this year, and this man played golf every single day to the point where sometimes he would choose golf over some of our activities as a family, just because that was the thing that he loved to do. And you know, unfortunately, because of some family issues or whatever, he was unable to play golf for 6 months. And it was like he was a completely different person. And now watching him with his balance, he's very unstable. You know, and there's a lot of things that I've noticed. And it was a like turn of a dime, guys. Like this man was so active, walked the golf courses, carried his bag, you know, drove the golf cart in and out, like on standing on weird angles to hit the ball and doing very, very well for his age. Now seeing this transition of something that happened so quickly, it's one of those things where when we started talking about this, you know, one of the reasons why I think that it's important, especially if you are someone that is my age and has some elderly parents or you work with seniors, I've noticed too over the time I would, you know, call my father and it would take him a long time to get to the phone, or he, you know, I'd miss his call and I would think he's out and about and it was him trying to get up off of the chair in order to go answer the phone. And so, and yes, he has a mobile phone, y'all, but it was never close to him. So we ended up having to invest in one of those recliners that actually lifts him up in order for him to get up faster in order to do other things. And I know that that is something that it's a safe chair for him to get to a standing position, get his balance, and then walk. That is something that no child ever wants to have to deal with or actually see. So now what he has to do on that chair is leave it down, and he has to do squats every single day, holding on, making sure that his walker is out in front of him to try to build the strength back up, which was something, again, he lost within 6 months. And so it's one of those where you want to really think, you know, what is going to be things that you're going to have to consider for yourself as you age, also as you're around people that are going to continue to age, and things you don't want to see. So starting doing some of these sit to stands, getting some ideas of where they are now, and then working on these particular movement patterns, flexibility, mobility, and really continuing to strengthen the quads and glutes, as well as throughout the core, is only going to help people's quality of life. And then also, again, I always say chances of falls, because if you can't stand very easily, you're very unstable, and going from one position to that can throw someone forward. And that's how the falls easily happen. And it can lead to something really tragic.
Right.
Dun, dun, dun. There's the morbid side of me.
Yeah, and I, you know, and I like what you're talking about here, Wendy, with some of the strategies. So if you're doing this, one of the things I suggest, and you know, I've done with my clients, is record yourself getting onto the floor if you're doing that, or if you're just doing the seated chair version, record yourself doing that. And one of the things that I've done when it comes to watching a client sit down and stand up is I'll record it, and then I'll show them, okay, this is what you're doing. You have to, you know, like with some clients, they have when they lean forward, they lean way forward just to get their more so to create momentum so they can get their center of gravity over their feet, and then they stand up from there, and then they wonder, why does my back hurt every so often? It's like, well, you're not really using your hips, you're not really using your legs, you're bending over quite a bit when you get out of that chair. So when you lean over that much, well, what muscles have to fire up to get you into that upright position? Your low back is going to have to kick in a little bit more than it would if you had more hip strength. But once you record and once you can see the quality of movement or where they have the tendency to compensate or kind of use other areas of their body to help assist the weak side, you know, this is where you look at it and then you can say, okay, well, because you lean forward a little bit more, let's work on some hip strength. Okay, let's work on, and maybe it could be through their ankles, even though you're sitting down. Maybe their ankles don't flex enough, their knee can't come forward enough, so they have to get that really forward leaning position to get their hips involved. So maybe it does mean, okay, we need to look at the ankles. We need to look at, okay, do we need to foam roll, stretch the ankles, you know, the calf complex? Do we need to look at the hips as far as hip strength? Well, what about core work, right? Giving some structural integrity to the midsection. So from there, I highly encourage that you look at the quality of the movement. Where are these compensations coming from? Then you can kind of stitch together a strategy, a workout program, if you will, when it comes to, okay, is it the foot and ankle? Is it the hip? Is it the core? Right. And then from there, you can just from one variation of a total body assessment, then you can figure out, okay, well, this is what I need to do to move better. So Wendy, I'm going to ask you then, well, what exercise for those that want the exercises, right? Give bottom line me, all right? What are some things that generally most people can benefit from when it comes to having a better stand up?
I think age is a huge like key component into one of the exercises I would quote prescribe. So if it's an elderly client, I would have them in a seated position. Again, I would really work on trying to get some mobility. So like you said, the calf stretches, they could do that standing. And then even in a seated position, having them go through the alphabet with their ankles. Have you ever heard of that? Like we did that in rehab when somebody would have some ankle issue. They go through all capital letters, with their ankles making the letters. And then they go in all lowercase. And so, it actually challenges the mind of some of the elderly clients to think about the alphabet and then also just go through those motions. I think that's something that we do. Like I said, just practicing sitting to standing using whether it's a walker or, if they have to hold on to something or they're, close. I like to have people do push-ups against the wall. Again, is working on chest strength, but like you said, core without having to get on the ground if it's something that's not easy for those individuals. And then, of course, really just learning to get into the rows or retracted positions, whether they're just doing cobras with no weight, whether they have like just a mini band or some small band. So they don't have to go into a gym. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but these are going to be things that are going to be very beneficial in order to help maintain proper alignment and good integrity throughout all the main joints that we need in order to have good posture. Now, if somebody is more mobile, there's someone like you and I, where Ken, I see that in the very beginning you have a 3.5. That's unheard of. And so I would look at your movement patterns and I would say, okay, you know what? We're really going to go into lateral tube walks, really focus on strengthening the outer hip, which I would also do with my elderly clients, just standing, moving their leg out to the side. With someone like Ken, I would give them a band and really look at side to side walking and then forward and back walking with proper alignment and posture. I would put you on a floor or a stability ball and go through hip bridges, really trying to activate the glutes and lay off of the hamstrings. I may have you do some kind of lunge or squat or something that allows me to make sure you've got good tracking of the knee over the second and third toe, and then also coming up into a balanced position. Because a lot of that is really just working through the ankle, working through the hip, and making sure the knee is tracking correctly. And then really just doing a lot more core stuff. So, whether it's something like a Palloff press, things like, planks, side planks, any of those, I think are always going to be good. And then integrating total body exercises, putting it all together. So a squat to row, a step up to balance to curl to press. There are so many different variations. It just really depends on what is the safest exercise for that client. What can they do without compensating, and how can they maintain proper alignment throughout every movement that you give them?
It's like you've discussed these treatment strategies before, Wendy. And
Just a few times, just recently to my dad, like, what are you doing?
yeah,
I
yeah.
have a reputation to uphold, mister. You've got to be able to stand up.
That's right. And I think that the tube walking is great, because I love the lateral band walks or lateral tube walks just because they do so much. First of all, you're upright, you're moving, you're resisting, the out, depending on where you put the band, whether it's at the ankles or above the knees. You're going to challenge those hips, especially in that lateral or that frontal plane, the plane where you're going left to right, where we tend to have a little bit of weakness, right? A lot of times what we do in real life is in front of us, but moving left to right, we kind of have that as a blind spot because we don't walk like crabs and go left to right all day long. So if we don't do it, we lose it, right? If we don't encourage that movement pattern, we lose it. But there's a whole lot of benefit to having a strong lateral side. as you said, Wendy, you mentioned that the side planks on top of doing those lateral band walks. So, and those are key exercises that will, and even though we're talking about standing up and you're going to stand up in more of that sagittal or that forward motion, but having strength on that lateral component will add benefit and strength stability towards that forward and backward component as well. And I think, having that multi-dimensional approach to how we move is key to helping people get up and down, especially if we're talking about to the floor, to that upright position, because everything is moving, especially once we have to rotate our hips open. And I really felt that in I could feel my groin muscles just really like, what are you doing, man? You never did this. What is going on over here? That's my groin like looking up at me going, dude, what's going on?
I know. And it's so easy for me. But again, because it's something that, but I'm always getting up and down off the floor because I'm playing with my little man. It's like, oh, I've got to do that. Oh, I've got to go and turn on the oven. Oh, I've got to do this. Oh, I've got to get on for a podcast. Oh, I've got, I'm always on the floor with him doing something.
Right.
So it's an activity that I truly use every single day. So I think maybe because I do it very often, maybe that's why. But
you practice.
I didn't mean to. And so there you have it. But Ken, I'm really glad we brought this to the forefront because I think it's easy. It was eye-opening for me. It was very eye-opening for you. I thought it was really fun to have my family do. My 7-year-old can do it like it's nothing because he's like, what's the big deal? But watching my husband do it just gave us a big laugh. I thought it was actually pretty amusing. And then listening and seeing what you were doing was just a whole nother moment for me.
I'm glad I can add a couple giggles to your day. But nothing brings the family together than acknowledging someone's weakness.
Exactly. Especially if you're in a very competitive family, which again, you're like family to me, Ken. So
all right. No, I'll take that. So Wendy, hey, thanks for your insight on sit and stand and what that means and what it could mean to understand someone's ability to move and what that might mean for what we need to incorporate into our workout program. So I'm always happy to learn something from these recordings, Wendy. So thank you very much. And for those of you that are listening to both Wendy Batts and I, Ken Miller here on Random Fit, thank you so much for your time. And hopefully you gained as much from this podcast recording as I did. So if you like what you listen to, like, follow, subscribe, download, share, and more importantly, we ask this every recording is comment. Let us know what you want to hear us discuss, and we'll do the best we can to get that on Random Fit for you. So until next time, take care and be well.